Welcome to another episode of Jay Leno's Garage. Now, after a couple of weeks of sensible cars like the Vipers and the Corvettes and various assorted motorcycles, we're back to being silly. Now, if you've been to this website before, you've probably seen my tank car. That's the one with the M47 patent tank engine. That car was designed by my friend Randy Grubb. He did the body, and he's an outrageous, stylish designer. This is his latest project. I'm not sure what it is. He brought it here to show me. I'm going to let him explain it to you. Randy, come on in. This is Randy Grubb. As you can see, Randy, also a sharp dresser, almost as sharp as I am. Randy, as I said, was the man behind the vision of my tank car. We did a lot of modifications to it since we got it from him. But that wasn't really meant to be a road car. That was more, it didn't have brakes and that stuff on it when we got it.
I view myself as an automotive artist creating
Right.
full-size sculptures that you get to drive.
That's what it is. Anyway, we went through that car and we changed a bunch of things. This one he drove here. This is a functioning, working automobile. It appears to have 12 cylinders. Tell us what this is.
Well, powering this particular vehicle is a Detroit diesel 12V71 two-stroke diesel.
Right.
So these were made in the 70s and they were kind of out by the late 70s.
Right.
It's a very unique motor, 12V
Right.
and 71, meaning each cylinder is 71 cubic inches.
Wow.
So 71 times 12, that's a whole bunch.
Now, the twin superchargers, that's standard on this?
That is totally stock. This motor
Wow.
is totally stock from here down, and those two 671 superchargers in line are stock.
And what kind of horsepower did this make?
Well, this is the non-turboed version, which they actually turboed going into the blowers.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was the high horsepower version. This is the lower horsepower version. We're just under 500 horsepower, but we have almost 1,000 foot-pounds of torque.
Yeah, that's the thing about diesel. You get that tremendous torque. And the transmission you're using is what?
A very large Allison, like out of a Greyhound
Right.
bus. It's a 4-speed automatic to make it easy to drive.
Now, if you come around the back of the vehicle, you'll see the real genius of Randy's work. He is a wonderful sculptor, just the way he did this gas tank. What was the vision here?
Well, obviously I'm a big study of the old cars and the beautiful boat-tailed roadsters
Right,
of
right.
past, so I kind of wanted to introduce a little bit of that boat-tail flavor. Obviously the gas tank is a real feature because it's on the back of the car, and a lot of those, classic cars that we love end in the beautiful point. So
And you like nickel more than chrome, don't you?
I do. It's got a warmer glow
Yeah, I'm a
to
big
it.
fan of nickel. Now, this body, did you start with an existing truck body and modify it?
Well, this is actually a Peterbilt that I started with, a Model 351 cab, which was a long, narrow nose Pete that I started with, which really has kind of beautiful proportions to begin with.
Right.
And of course, we chopped it. We did a 5-inch chop in back and 8-inch chop out of the front to create that wedge cut look that we've got going here.
And I like all the rivets that make it look sort of, I don't know what it looks like. It looks like something you'd see in a Terminator movie.
It's almost out of an airplane,
There
isn't
we
it?
go. And these seats, look at the leather work here. Did you do the leather work on this?
No, I worked with a saddle maker up in Southern Oregon where I live
Right.
and work, and I was just really taken with his beautiful work and figured, why do the equestrians all get it?
Now, how many of these creations have you built? I think mine was the first one a number of years ago. Are there 4 of them out there?
This is vehicle number 4 that I've created from scratch.
I remember you did one most recently. It was blue and you had a glass grill. Because you were a glass blower by trade, right?
Yes, for many years,
Right.
and that glass grill in the B702 was a very unique feature.
Well, it's interesting when you see this combination of sort of styling and engineering, and it's really exciting. Now, this car was built from the ground up by you in your shop, wasn't it?
Yes, single-handedly.
And how long does it take to do something like this?
Well, this is your basic 3,000-hour project. I have
Right.
3,000 hours over the last 15 months. So when you do the math on that, it's really a serious medical condition. This is 10 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And how does it work? Do you go out and find a vehicle like a Peterbilt and go, oh, I'd like to modify that? Or do you sit down with a pen and pencil, sketch something out, and then try to build that? Where does the inspiration for this particular vehicle come from?
It all starts with the motors. As with your car, that big giant tank motor,
Right.
we started with that huge tank motor, and we had to scale the vehicle to fit the motor. And that's basically my job as an artist. It's a scaling project. The motors are so large that the trick is to create something flowing and beautiful that's in scale with the
Right.
motor that we have here.
And in the economy we live in, this is probably the smallest vehicle you've built, right? This would be like an economy vehicle. The wheelbase is so short. This is like the tiniest one you've made.
This is one of the best driving, easiest, most user-friendly vehicles I've created to date.
And what kind of mileage does this get with this diesel engine?
Well, we'd rather measure it in smiles per gallon.
Smiles per gallon.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
And we get a lot of smiles per gallon out of this baby.
Let's look at the radiator. Now, the radiator is you built up from...
No, it actually started as a long, narrow-nosed Peterbilt radiator that we took 10.5 inches out of.
I see.
To create the proportions. This is my version of one of the old Top Fuel Altereds. Remember the short wheelbase Altereds? Yeah. And the Altereds had certain design elements like the bug catcher intake, the zoomy tubes, and the 12-spoke spindle mounts. And so those critical design elements I brought into this giant-size altered sculpture.
And are these thermostatic, or they open all the time?
Well, they were originally thermostatic. They opened and closed to let air in and out, and right now they're manual.
I see.
So the manual with the electric fan, I'm really able to modulate the temperature.
That axle looks familiar. Is that the same axle as
Very
my car?
similar to yours, just a little more out of the very center.
And what is that, GMC?
That's a GMC 7000 series
Truck
axle that I took 9 inches right out of the very center of it.
That's the same axle that's in my car.
Well, you know, it's a good idea.
Yeah. And the brakes are off of what?
Well, that's all custom made. I work with Bear brakes on that, and we created the wheels from scratch. These were 375 pounds of billet aluminum when we started, but the 12-spoke spindle mount is critical to capture the flavor of that alter.
Right, right. Show us the gauges.
In a semi-truck, of course, the speedometer never went to 160, but in our little hot rod, we had to modify that to accommodate that 160 mile an hour speedometer. Also, the RPMs. We are accommodating a little more RPM than the motor would normally spin. Normally, this motor was governed at 2150, but we can buzz it right up to 28, no problem. Dual temperature gauges in both heads are very important. If this motor gets even up to 220 degrees, it's not going to last very long. Temperature is very sensitive on these motors. So we just have your basic gauge cluster. What is interesting about this is the fuel kill. And to kill the motor, you actually pull this lever out, and it mechanically shuts off the fuel to the motor. So very interesting.
What is the normal operating temperature, 180?
About 180.
Wow, so you only got a very short window there.
It's a very short window, and that's why with the electric fans and the louvers, we can modulate it right between 160 and about 180 pretty easily, and it's working pretty well so far.
Okay, and you got a removable steering wheel, turn signals, everything else.
Yeah.
Tell me about the windows.
Well, the window, obviously with the chop, we got a lot of attitude out of the deal. And I call this piece Pissed Off Pete because it really has a lot of attitude. And the key to that is that front windshield. We contoured the windshield to match the cowl rather than coming straight across with the windshield the way it was originally. We've done a lot of just subtle recontouring of things.
And this is the transmission here. Tell us about that.
This is a 4-speed automatic like you'd find in a Greyhound bus. It's a 4-speed, so this is first, second, third, drive, and then to get into reverse or get into neutral, you pull out this lockout, and to get into reverse, you pull out this lockout. So it's a double lockout, 4-speed automatic, but it's very easy to drive.
Let's go around the rear of the vehicle. Tell me about these springs.
Well, the springs are a rather unique approach. They would be termed a quarter elliptical. We've got it mounted on the frame, which is kind of unique. Rather than putting the spring pack on the axle, which would be carrying it in an unsprung weight situation, we moved it up onto the frame so that it is part of the sprung weight now, which makes the car handle a little better. Semi-truck rear ends are kind of interesting. The drive line is always centered in a semi-truck. That means the pumpkin housing is slightly off-center. So in a sculpture like this where the rear end is such a visual feature, what I started by doing is cutting 5 inches out of the long side to center the pumpkin so that visually you'd have that nice centered pumpkin since it's such a dramatic feature. And the disc brakes are also stock semi-truck units.
And how many gallon is this tank?
We're 35 gallons.
So that gets you about 100 miles?
Well, if you're doing well, yeah. And it's downhill most of the way.
Yeah. All right. Okay, well, let's see. Anything else we need to know about this before we fire this thing up?
Yeah, let's fire it up.
You got 500 miles on it?
Those are engine hours, engine revs.
As you can see, it's a little loud. That's why we shut it off. But you build these things. Now, you build them and then sell it. Do people come to you and say, this is what I want, or would you like to make them first and then sell them?
I like to make them first, and that way I can have control over the project.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So if you're interested in seeing more of Randy's work, his website is blastolene.com. Spell it.
Blastolene.com. Blastolene.
Check it out. It's a lot of fun. We'll see you next week. If I could still hear. See you next week.